If you look at a global map, the United States and Russia appear separated by vast, insurmountable oceans. But zoom in on the Bering Strait, and that massive geopolitical buffer shrinks to a gap of just 55 miles. Now look even closer, right at the center of the strait. Sitting directly in that narrow channel are two small landmasses, Big Diomede and Little Diomede. Here, the distance between these two rival superpowers drops to exactly 2.4 miles. You can stand on an American beach and look across the water at a Russian mountain. These two global empires are staring at each other across a desolate, frozen stretch of the Arctic Ocean. Here on this vintage map, you can see the international dateline, an invisible boundary determining the transition between calendar days. Map makers drew this red line so that it weaves directly between these two specific islands. Because of that line, the temporal math gets weird. The Russian island, Big Diomede, is 21 hours ahead of the American island, Little Diomede. Looking across that 2-mile gap means looking from yesterday straight into tomorrow. During deep winter, the environment transforms. The ocean water between the islands freezes completely solid, forming a thick ice bridge connecting the two nations. While you could hike from yesterday into tomorrow in an hour, the crossing is strictly illegal. The Russian island is a heavily guarded military installation. This 2-mile gap represents one of the most rigidly enforced militarized borders on the planet. The origins of this divide date back to 1867, when the United States purchased the territory of Alaska from the Russian Empire. This document is the actual 1868 U.S. Treasury warrant for $7,200,000. This distant, bureaucratic exchange of cash drew a mapmaker's line straight down the Bering Strait, sorting Little Diomede to America and Big Diomede to Russia. But for nearly a century after that paper was signed, that invisible political boundary meant nothing to the people living there. For over 3,000 years, the indigenous Inupiat civilization thrived here as a single, unified community. Families spanned both islands, freely crossing the water in the summer and the ice in the winter to trade and visit their relatives. Survival here meant hunting whales through fractured ice and fending off polar bear attacks on a landscape that remains frozen from December through June. In such an environment, the concept of a rigid national divide cutting through ancient hunting grounds was entirely foreign. That freedom vanished in 1948. As the Cold War escalated, the theoretical mapmaker's line hardened into a physical barrier known as the ice curtain. The Soviet government established a military base on Big Diomede and forced the entire indigenous population of the island to permanently relocate to mainland Russia. Today, the contrast across the strait is severe. Little Diomede remains an American town where 77 civilians cling to a small rocky beach. With the landscape frozen solid, residents rely entirely on helicopters battling severe Arctic winds to deliver basic food and fuel supplies. When they look out their windows, they see Big Diomede, now a desolate military outpost entirely devoid of civilian life. In 1948, centuries of shared history were severed. One island became a high-security military zone, while the other was left as a tiny American outpost, cutting through families and bloodlines with a single political decree. Decades have passed since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, yet the ice curtain remains frozen in place. Today, local advocates, like Little Diomede Tribal Coordinator Francis Sistuk Ozena, work to heal that divide and reunite their severed community. But any reunion requires navigating a labyrinth of international red tape and securing complex visas just to cross a geographical gap that can be walked in an hour. It is a race against time for the few remaining tribal elders on Little Diomede. The opportunity to see their relatives in Russia again is fading. When the harsh winter returns each year, the seawater hardens into a thick bridge connecting the two landmasses, a physical manifestation of what used to be a vital point of connection. The quirky reputation of Tomorrow Island and Yesterday Island obscures a deeper historical trauma. These rocks serve as a monument to the destructive power of arbitrary political lines. This 2.4-mile stretch of ice stands as a permanent reminder of how empires can fracture human communities, trapping one half of a family in tomorrow and the other half in yesterday.